Great.
Well, I haven't had Jules.
Waiting for stock.
So, Jules, thank you very much for coming back. Really appreciate your time as always.
Thank you. It's a beautiful day. The sun's out. I've had a coffee made for me. What more can I ask for?
Yeah, like you said, Jules, it's lovely to see you, mate. Thank you.
The joys of being retired. Whoa. He obviously thought that was a £1 coin. Never. In fact, he'd have done the same for a penny.
Right, Jules. So we've got. Well, we mentioned it, didn't we, on last film that you were going to come down and do some more filming, didn't we?
Yeah.
So we've had our heads together, mate, and we've come up with a few ideas, shall we say?
Yeah, stuff that comes up when I'm at conferences, shows, talking to people on the bank. The kind of questions you get asked at certain times of year. So in the middle of the year, you get asked about summer stuff, and in the end of the year, you get asked about winter stuff. And with the sun out, we know what I'm going to get asked about.
Well, that is, we thought it to be appropriate, Jules, because we're coming into spring now.
Yeah.
It's only another week or so, isn't it? A couple of weeks.
I take no notice of specific guidelines. People say, well, it's not a winter carp if it was caught after X. And those people are usually not fishing. Or it's not a spring carp because it was caught after this. Yeah. And those people are usually out fishing. To me, winter is winter and spring is spring. When it starts to warm up and there's a bit of warmth in that sun, when you're getting, 10 in the day, to me, that's spring.
That's
you
spring.
Consistently. I'm not bothered about the strict definition of it. Carp don't look at a strict definition, as far as I'm aware.
So just before we start, Julian, before we get to lake, so obviously, like we said, you don't look at it, but we're coming into spring. So sometimes it's still, them water temperatures are still a bit cooler, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Carp are cold-blooded. So in effect, the temperature of the water is the temperature of them. And if that water is 8 or 9 degrees, that's the temperature of the carp. And a carp that's 8 or 9 degrees ain't eating a lot of food.
Exactly,
You can give it all it wants, but it ain't eating it, and it certainly ain't digesting it.
So this brings us into the topic, spring tactics.
Yeah, anytime we are now on the, we're 20th of March?
20th of March, yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, any time now onwards is spring.
Yeah. Right, so you get to lake. What's your first thing you do, Julian? Is it location or?
Absolutely location. Location is based on, for me, years of experience. But location, carp have 3 things they need to survive: oxygen, warmth, and then food.
Yes.
And at this time of year, there's probably is enough oxygen in the water. It's not being eaten by the weed. So the oxygen is taken care of, but it's warmth, absolutely warmth. You could have spent the last 2 or 3 months and not seen a carp in the surface areas. And all of a sudden, it's like somebody's put a buoyancy aid in them. All of a sudden, they're on the surface.
They're on the surface,
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you that, mate.
For me, location is absolutely the most important thing at this time of year. You've got to find them, because although they might be moving, they're not going to swim round looking for that little patch of bait. I can assure you of that.
Yeah.
If they're swimming round, they're looking for warmth, not food.
Yeah, and you can guarantee this time of year, Jules, when you are on a lake and you think, oh, it's too cold, it's too cold, it's too cold. Never, ever, when that sun comes up, forget about them shallows, because them fish will be there, won't they?
Location, I mean, I fished yesterday, and it's a water that's quite difficult at times in the winter, and those fish I caught 2 in 1.5 foot of water, purely and simply because I looked where the sun was most on the water, and between 11 and 3 p.m, there's a certain area of water that gets the most sun, and that area of water is about 1.5 foot.
Real, isn't it?
Yeah, and those bites came at 1:30 and about 3:45 in 1.5 foot of water at the most. It could even be a foot. If there's enough water to cover them, they'll go in it. When you run a bath, that bath is warm. It's warm quicker at 6 or 7 inches than it is at 8 foot. So location to me is the important.
What about timing? What about timing, Jules?
Again, location is things that people talk about the most, but the problem is you can find carp, but you've got to be on them where they're going to feed. And there's this thing that says you can make them feed all the time. At this time of year, they're picking, and you've got to be there when they're prepared to pick a bait. I think it's like sweets in a sweet shop. They'll pick 1 or 2 up. it's no point fishing that 1.5 foot of water on an overnight. If somebody found out where I was fishing yesterday, which I'll tell them, and they got there to do an overnighter,
where were you fishing, mate?
I'll tell anybody. And if they got there at 6 o'clock and packed up at 6 o'clock in the morning, they're not going to catch, because them fish are in 1.5 foot of water in the dark. So timing, you have got to be in the right spot at the right time, and that's why people fish longer sessions, catch more carp, because eventually they're in the right place.
Yeah. Do you is there any particular upbaits that you go in spring? Do you change your upbaits? Or?
Well, I'm a big fan of the bright high-vis hook baits. For some reason, yellow is the one that seems to work every year. Start off.
You do like yellow, don't you? Because I've heard you say that a few times.
Yeah. Whether it's the contrast, whether it's the pineapple, but to be honest, I think it's more of the colour than anything. I think I don't think they're looking for, but when they find it, they'll pick it up. So for me, a bright hook bait. I'm not looking for feed items. I don't think they're scared of yellow. A lot of these fish haven't sampled food in the winter months.
Yeah.
And there's something about pineapple, whether it's the flavours or whether it's the colour. But for me, chucking a little yellow pop out will do you more good than harm.
What about feed, Jules? How do you approach it? Do you
No, I literally don't use any feed at this time of year.
No flake, no pellet, no.
I might use it in a little PVA bag. Once I can find them, they're there. They haven't been caught time and time again. I will only use a little bit of flake, maybe 2 boilies in a little mesh bag.
Yeah.
It's just to draw a little bit more attraction to the hook bait. I don't think they're swimming around looking for bait and say, oh, there's not enough bait there. I think they're picking at bait, and all that flake and that extra little boilie will do is adding more attraction to that. You will catch a lot more carp with less feed at this time of year than you will with loads of feed. And that's what you've got to consider.
That's what you've got to.
Yeah.
Just to going off it a bit, Joe. When I'm sat here, when you were talking, obviously I look at you. We had some comments say, I wish my wife would look at me like Gerard looks at Jules when he's talking.
Well,
do I need to be worried?
No, it's just a civil thing, isn't it?
Brilliant. Right, Joe. So earlier we picked up on obviously this beautiful little bit of sun.
Yep.
Coming out. Just tell us a bit about zigs. Are you in favour, or do you use them?
I'm never controversial.
Are they beneficial? Sorry.
I try not to be controversial, because when you're being controversial, if you give your opinion, it's what people don't like. I'm not a fan of zigs for two reasons. Number one, I'm not very good at them,
Yeah.
And I think it's something that's little things can stick you with you for ages, like freezer baits. Because freezer baits were good in the olden days and shelf life weren't. Even now, because stabilised baits are just as good psychologically. And with zigs, years ago, I watched fish in shallow water swim round zigs. And if I'd seen them do that on a normal bottom bait and a hook bait, I would just think, well, that's one of those things. But because I saw them swim around zigs, there's this thing in my brain that goes, oh, they're not as good. I'm not a fan of zigs because I don't fish a lot of waters where I need to fish zigs. I'm also concerned about foul looking of them. If you watch a lot of the underwater videos, it's that exposed hook in the middle of...
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of it. If I give you advice on zigs, it would be wrong. It would be just talking about... Zigs are very effective. What I would say is if your water in spring is fishing on zigs, get one out there.
Yeah.
That's the most honest advice
There's been a few people coming in sharp few at regulars and stuff like that, mate, and on lake, there's only zigs been catching.
Well, in that case, I would say I would use zigs. It's not my approach normally, but if that's what's working, you get on it. You don't go and try and prove a point by saying, I don't morally agree with zigs or they've never worked for me. I'm going to fish on the bottom. If they're working and you can catch them that way, get on the zigs.
What about baiting up? Pre-baiting, Jules?
I don't think you need to do.
No.
I honestly don't think you need to do. Unless it's a water that you have to yourself where you know where the carp are and you can bait up, I personally wouldn't bait up at this time of year. I might put a little bit of bait out as a leave just so they get a sample, but I would not be baiting up to lock carp into areas. And this time of year, well, carp will be where they normally want to be. And at this time of year, they'll definitely be where they want to be, not where you want them to be. And baiting up, is an absolute point, is a waste of time at this year, in my opinion, because most carp anglers, like carp, have just woken up. And all of a sudden, carp from seeing no bait are seeing bait all over the place. They haven't seen it for months on a lot of water.
Yeah.
And sticking more bait out is just a waste of bait. All I would say is pop into your fishing tackle shop and buy loads.
Wickersley Angling, obviously.
Wickersley Angling, and get yourself a stack of bait. Don't throw it in at this time of year. I don't think you need to.
Yeah, brilliant. How do you find it this time of year on lakes, Julian, with angling pressure or anything like that?
That's the difficulty, isn't it? You have, we want it both ways. In winter, we go, oh, it's flipping cold and it's hard work and I'm not catching anything. And I wouldn't mind somebody just popping down for a chat. And then when it gets to spring, all of a sudden, every man and his dog wakes up. They come out of hibernation and the water is, you know, you've got to get into your head that you are, all of a sudden, instead of there being 1 or 2 people on the water, there's 12. And it's a psychological thing, because I know at this time of year that you might have 12 anglers on in April and May, but come June, they're going to drop off. So psychologically, you've got more carp feeding, but you've got more people after them. Don't blow yourself out. Don't kill yourself at this time of year. There is more angling pressure, but there's more carp to be caught. You've just got to be positive.
Yeah. And another thing, Jules, as well, is because, like I said, it is coming into March, but we can still have...
Coming to April,
yeah, sorry. We can still have bad weather and frosts and things like that. Do you look at weather, or are you always prepared? Because if you are doing an overnighter, you've got to take them essentials, haven't you?
Yeah, it's a bit like it's how I approach bait. I fish for a bite, but I'm prepared for a red letter day. So I've always got plenty of bait with me. I will go on a sunny day like this and think, yeah, I'll fish out my chair and I'll fish just off the bed chair, which I love doing. But I'm also prepared for the icy cold nights. So yeah, you know, it's like fishing, you know, it's like bait. So I'm always prepared for warm clothes and things like that. You need to be warm, because once you feel cold and dispirited, you are looking for excuses to go home early. And we've all done it. We're thinking, I'll be glad when I've had enough of this.
Yeah.
And generally that is not to do with lack of action, but because you feel cold, hungry. Take the gear, because if you don't use it, you can always take it home. But if you ain't got it, you're going to look for an excuse to go home.
Yeah. Brilliant, mate. Jules, just explain to me, will you, what the term not blowing out means. What's that mean when you sometimes say that?
Well, that goes back to angling pressure. You know, it's people who kill themselves on fishing early on. They haven't fished for 4 months. And, you know, I've talked to people at shows, so this isn't just theoretical. The amount of people I've talked to at fishing shows and say, how's it going, mate? Well, I haven't been since November, or I've only been once since. And all of a sudden that warmth comes up, and all of a sudden, like, I've got to kill myself. I've got to fish 2 or 3 days a week. And they're fishing 2 or 3 days a week, but there's like, all of a sudden, there's 7 anglers doing overnighters.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, they do so much, and all of a sudden, it's too much. And the trick is to pace yourself. And, you know, they're not all going to get caught in March, April and May. Yes, that's the time of the year when they appear to be easiest to catch. But I see it every year, anglers who kill themselves in April and May. Come June and July, you don't see them again.
Yeah.
And anglers in December were saying, can't wait till the spring. Anglers in the spring will say, can't wait till the summer. Anglers in the summer will say, roll on the autumn. And anglers in the autumn will say, I love my winter fishing. Pace yourself. Don't blow out.
Don't blow. I think that's an absolute fantastic tip. So it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
It's a marathon, yeah. I'm more of a tortoise than I am a hare.
Jules, I mean, that were absolutely fantastic, mate. Just finding out information from you about coming into spring and yours. So I hope you've all enjoyed that, and I hope you've all learnt something. Put it into your armoury. And Jules, thank you very much, mate.
As ever.
Thanks a lot, buddy.
Keep looking at me that way.